He is born with the weakest support class, but he becomes the leader of the strongest group of adventurers. Noel was born in a world where the gate to the demonic realm opened whenever a great amount of mana gathers in an area. The greater the concentration of mana, the greater the level of the demonic gate, and stronger the monsters that come out of it. Those who fight them are called adventurers, and his grandpa Brandon was known as the strongest hero in his day. Inspired by his legendary stories, Noel dreams of becoming a hero too. One night, a level 12 demonic gate opened up in his village and powerful demonic beasts came out of it, including a beast lord. The beasts started killing the villagers and burning everything in their sight, and the only one who could face them is Brandon. Noel, who is just a weak teenager right now, goes to the underground shelter along with other civilians. Brandon tells him that he will be safe from monsters here and tells him not to leave the shelter at any cost while he goes out to buy time till the capital sends their forces. Noel knows that any reinforcements from the capital will be too late, and he fears that his grandpa is going to die. Brandon sternly tells him not to look down on him, because he was once the strongest hero called Overdeath. He assures Noel that he will keep him safe even if it is the last thing he does. With that, the badass old man walks out with his gigantic war axe, ready to face the demonic beasts who are hunting and eating any human they see. Brandon chops the beasts in half with just one swing of his axe, but then the leader of the beasts notices him. He sends all his minions to attack the old man, and Brandon charges towards them without any hesitation. As he fights the beasts outside, Noel shudders in fear inside the shelter. He keeps worrying about his grandpa, and as he hears loud explosions outside, his mind goes blank. At dawn, when the sounds outside stop, Noel leaves the shelter to find his grandpa. Among the corpses of the monsters, Noel finds Brandon, but he has been severely wounded, losing both his legs in the battle. Noel screams as he rushes to his side, but the old man has not logged out of this world yet. He tells Noel that this is the fate of adventurers, and they always live on the edge of life and death. He asks the boy if he still wants to become an adventurer like him, and with tears in his eyes, Noel replies that he will definitely become an adventurer. Brandon asks him to promise to become the strongest adventurer in that case, and Noel promises. The old man laughs as he pats his grandson's head, telling him that he loves him. With that, he finally says goodbye to this world, and Noel is left devastated. 2 years later, Noel has become an adventurer, just like he promised his granddad, and currently, he is in a dungeon, fighting monsters with his party. However, his class is a talker, which is the weakest class among adventurers. He uses his yapping skills to order his teammates around, telling them how to defeat the 4 armed monsters in front of them. They skillfully follow his orders and easily defeat the monsters that are the spawns of the lesser vampire queen. Noel tells his teammates that the vampire spawns are small fries that can't even use magic, and their target is to destroy the queen, who is a strong independent woman and doesn't need a male to give birth to kids. As they head into the cave to find and destroy all the goblin spawns, the tall knight named Walter asks Noel why don't they head straight to the queen and kill her instead of dealing with the weaklings. He says it will be the most efficient way, but Noel refuses, saying it is a bad idea. He explains that their party Blue Beyond is just at C rank, and normally, they should not be able to take a B rank mission like this. The only way they can be sure of defeating the queen is by taking out the vampire spawns first, and if they try to do a speedrun here, they will all die. Walter says he has no choice but to accept the words of a talker because that is the rule of their party. He acts condescending, calling Noel a talker, and then credits him for the success of their party. Noel is pissed on being called a talker, which is a specialized support class. They can provide buffs to their teammates with their special skills, but they don't have any combat abilities, which is why they are mocked as the weakest class. While Noel is busy thinking about this, the vampire queen sneaks up on the group. Luckily, Noel notices it just in time and warns his group, but he is not fast enough to dodge the poison gas attack of the vampire queen. His teammates are worried about him because they know Noel won't be able to survive the poison for long. The wizard Tanya tries to search for him, but the vampire queen appears from the poison cloud and bitch slaps her to the ground. Walter and the redhead Lloyd attack the vampire queen, but they can't fight against her without Noel's buffs. Walter yells at Noel to give them orders and tells him to at least do his job as a talker properly. This pisses off Noel, and he remembers his grandpa who had taught him to never let anyone look down upon him. He chugs a bottle of antidote and pulls out a Glock, shooting the vampire queen. As the poison cloud clears, Noel declares that he will show everyone how a talker fights. He uses his class skill tactician to buff his teammates. Just by giving them orders, Noel can improve all stats of his party by 25%. He then warns them about the incoming area attack, and then uses another skill called Battle Roar that increases the mana and stamina of their party members by 25%. After that, Noel tells Tanya to cast a shield on the two fighters and orders them to attack the monster. Walter deals a deep wound to the Vampire Queen, while Lloyd cuts off her tentacles. Everything is going well, but then Tanya notices more monsters behind them and freaks out, thinking that they won't be able to defeat the Queen now. Noel immediately uses another one of his skill to calm down her mind and reignite her will to fight. He tells others to keep fighting the Queen and leave the small monsters to him. He orders Tanya to keep casting shields on the two fighters and tells them to keep dodging the Vampire Queen's attacks while preparing their ultimate attack. The lesser vampires attack him, and Noel uses his Stun Howl skill to Pikachu them. The monsters fall to the ground, and then uses his magic gun to shoot an ice bullet that creates a giant ice crystal trapping all the monsters inside. One of them is still left, and Noel has only one bullet left too. He checks his watch to see if it is time to use his trump card, and shoots the last bullet at the Vampire Queen to distract her. He uses his skill assault command that makes Walter and Lloyd go beyond their limits, and then orders them to use their finishing skill on the Vampire Queen. The two warriors attack the Vampire Queen, chopping off her head with a clean strike. Everyone turns to Noel to tell them that they won, but they are shocked when they see that a vampire has reached him. However, the vampire freezes just an inch away from Noel, who falls to the ground for no reason. He knew that when the Vampire Queen dies, all her kids also die, so he did not bother dealing with the last vampire. He checks his watch and sees that everything happened just as he predicted. The mana around the area dissipates and it returns to normal. Noel tells his team that they did a good job, but they call him reckless for putting his life in danger. Hearing this, Noel remembers how sad he was when he learned that he got the weakest class. He was too young back then, and his grandpa laughed as he told him not to worry about it. He told Noel that he has an innate talent to become an adventurer, and promised to train him to become the strongest. Now, Noel promises his late grandpa that even though he has the weakest class, he will become the strongest adventurer, surpassing even him. He currently lives in the Velnant Empire, which is a very prosperous nation, but also quite susceptible to the attack of demonic beasts. The Empire saw an opportunity in that, and they started using the parts of the beasts to create magic tools that made them even more wealthy. Because of this, the adventurers who head into demonic realms and fight the beasts are hailed as heroes. Noel and his party go to a restaurant to celebrate their successful mission. While everyone is happily chatting about the mission, Noel is lost in thoughts about how he needs to get a scout to make their team more well-balanced. Walter is already drunk, and he starts hitting on Noel thinking that he is a pretty tomboy. Noel tells him to shut up, and Walter changes the topic, asking if he is so prickly because he failed to bargain a good amount for the stuff this time. He tells Noel that adventurers should not care this much about money, and even his dear grandpa would have told him the same. That rubs Noel the wrong way, because Brandon always told him that adventurers must be particular about their money because they should always go to the battlefield with the best gear and potions. He told him never to back down and get the bag, and Noel has been following his words ever since. Walter suddenly starts yelling at him, saying that his greed for money is spoiling the reputation of their party, and Noel starts taunting him, saying that he thought it was his single-digit ick that was ruining their reputation. Walter starts cursing him loudly, calling him a coward who hides behind them and gives orders while they risk their lives fighting monsters. Noel doesn't react and calls Walter's mama a hoe, which pisses the musclehead even more. He grabs Noel's collar and tells him that he is going to teach him a lesson now, and Noel tells him to bring it on. However, before anything can happen, Lloyd breaks the fight, telling them to behave in public at least. After that, they go outside to divide the profits of this mission. Despite the large amount they earned, their individual shares are quite low, because most of the money went to equipment repair, the party fund, and the commission of the clan that gave them this job. Tanya is not happy, but Lloyd comforts her, saying that if they get a few more good-paying jobs like this one, they can live a better life. Noel says that is unlikely because good jobs like this are taken up by the clans who are directly in contact with the government. When they hire freelancers like them to do that job, they charge a huge commission, and they can't get anywhere like that. Noel suggests Lloyd to use their party funds to start their own clan, shocking everyone. Lloyd replies that the fees to start a new clan is 20 million, but they only have 12.8 million right now. Noel replies that he already knows it, and that is why he is going to cover the remaining amount himself, because they desperately need to form a clan now. Lloyd says they will need a clan building in the city too, and the rent is expensive. Noel tells him that he knows a place where the rent is cheap, and then Tanya says that they are not experienced enough to manage a clan. Noel asks when will they be experienced enough, and says that they will learn how to run a clan once they start one. Tanya and Lloyd are not yet sure, and they say that they are still too young to win the government's trust. Noel replies that they are young and good-looking, and that is definitely going to be a positive. He says that adventurers are heroes nowadays, and young people with skills and charisma get popular quickly. Noel believes that they will also get famous, and then maybe some companies will sign endorsement contracts with them too. Walter sees his point and decides to support Noel in opening the clan. Tanya asks how can he decide so easily, and he replies that he wants power, money and that won't happen as long as they stay just a small party. He then tells Tanya that he might side with her if she becomes his woman, but Lloyd yells at him, telling him to stay away from his girl. Noel tells everyone to stop being distracted, and asks Lloyd to cast his vote. Lloyd asks Noel if he will not back down, and he refuses, saying it has always been his dream to become the greatest adventurer and surpass his grandpa. He says that if they are not going to form a clan, he will leave the party and take all his share with him. Lloyd decides to agree to his suggestion, and says that they will talk out the details the day after tomorrow. Noel and Walter agree to it, and leave to their places. However, on the day of the meeting, Walter runs to Noel's room in a hurry to tell him that they have been screwed over. Lloyd and Tanya have betrayed them, running away with the entire party fund. Walter hands a letter from Lloyd in which he says that he invested in this world's equivalent of Bitcoin and lost all his money, so he took the party funds and ran away before anyone could know about his failed investments. On reading this, Noel suddenly starts laughing, and Walter gets pissed off at him, asking how can he laugh in such a situation. Noel says that he finds it funny that of all people the righteous Lloyd would steal from his teammates. He then asks Walter when and where did he find the note. Walter replies that he found about a good job, and went to Lloyd's room to tell him about it before the big guilds snatched it. However, he had already cleaned up the room, and the innkeeper gave him this letter from Lloyd. Noel asks if the innkeeper said anything about the time when he left, and Walter says that he left last night around 8. Noel realizes that Lloyd and Tanya left in the dark of the night just before the gates closed so that no one could track them. If Walter had not been impatient, they would not have found this letter until evening, and by then, Tanya and Lloyd would have been too far from their reach. Walter asks him what should they do now, and Noel says they will find which gate Lloyd used, and then chase after him on horseback to catch up to him. Walter is impatient and begins dragging him out immediately, but Noel asks him what will he do once they find Lloyd. Walter replies that he will beat the living daylights out of the traitor and then make up with him like a grown-up man. Noel calls Walter dumb for thinking that they can still sort things out with Lloyd after all this. He says that they will definitely have a brutal fight against him, and it may become a fight to death too. He asks Walter if he can take on Lloyd, and he believes that it is possible with Noel backing him. However, he hesitates when Noel asks him if he can kill Tanya too. On top of that, even if they beat them, there is a good chance that they won't get their money back. Walter is frustrated now and asks Noel if they are just supposed to cry themselves to sleep then. Noel tells him to stop being stupid, even though there is no way that he can do so. He declares that he will catch the traitors and then make them pay back 1,000 times. After that, they reach a tavern, and Walter asks what are they supposed to do here. Noel tells him to stick to the fighting and let him do the thinking, and then opens the door. He loudly yells that he has a job for all the adventurers here. He tells them about Lloyd and Tanya who have fled with their party funds and declares a reward of 2 million on whoever finds them. Walter freaks out on hearing this and asks Noel why is he getting others involved in this. Noel tells him that they can't do a single thing by themselves and he is sending out many people after the traitors to see if they are hiding more secrets from them. He then asks if anyone is willing to take the job, and a guy named Wolf raises his hand. He asks Noel if he knows where Lloyd went, but all he can tell him that he left at night. Wolf thinks it is still easy for him to find them, and he immediately leads his party on the hunt. Other adventurers also take up the offer and run to find the fugitives, but Noel is not satisfied. Just then, a shady-looking guy approaches him to ask more about the people he is looking for, and that was what Noel had been looking for. He takes the shady old guy to an alley, where he reveals that he ran into Lloyd and Tanya last night, and he knows their location. However, his party can't beat them alone, so he is asking Noel and Walter for help. Noel says he will come along, but since they are going to do the fighting, the reward is reduced to just 1 million. The old man says it is unfair and tries to bargain, but Noel doesn't even budge. He knows that the old guy is past his prime and he would literally kill for 1 million. He is right, and Shady accepts the job offer. He reveals that he saw Lloyd and Tanya heading south last night, and they are most probably going to the Carnot village. Noel tells Shady to get his party ready and meet with Walter at the gate, while he goes to make some more preparations. Soon, they meet in front of the gate, and Walter asks Noel if he can fight Lloyd and Tanya. He affirms, saying he will fight them without mercy, and even kill them if he has to. He admits that he has always been thinking what to do when someone betrays him, and Lloyd has just given him the chance to do so. Walter is taken aback by this and asks if he always doubted them, and Noel replies that he doubts everyone. He says that it takes great professionalism to work in a team, even when doubting them, which a muscle brain like Walter won't understand. Walter is pissed at this, and Noel worries if he can actually fight against Lloyd and Tanya, who have just reached the Carnot village. Tanya is still worried, but Lloyd assures her that they will be fine, because Noel won't waste their time if he knows that he can't get his money back. He jinxed himself by saying that, because the very next moment, Noel appears behind them, asking if they are enjoying their date. Walter is with him, and Shady's party has got them surrounded on all sides. Lloyd tries pulling out his sword, but one stunning howl from Noel makes him and Tanya go numb, and they fall to their knees. Noel takes them to a graveyard for interrogation, and stops Walter from pummeling Lloyd's face because it is not worth the effort. He asks Lloyd if he spent all the money from their last mission on his bad investment too, and he replies that he used it to clear his loans. Noel suddenly realizes that the bit about a bad investment is a cover story and Lloyd is actually a gambling addict. He deduces that Lloyd lost too much money gambling and then went to a loan shark to borrow more money so that he could keep playing. Lloyd is in shambles as Noel unravels his story, and he suddenly starts yelling, saying that they have no right to complain to him. Walter grabs his collar, telling him that they put their life on line for the money he gambled away, and Lloyd tries to gaslight him, saying that they don't understand the pressure that was on him. He says that it is their fault that they put all the burden of being the leader on him, and suddenly, Mick kicks him in the face to shut him up. He begins stomping on him, asking him to stop giving them shit about pressure and burden, because he was the one who volunteered to be the leader. He keeps hitting him like a maniac until Lloyd begs him to stop. Tanya speaks up, asking Noel to let Lloyd go, and he replies that the only way he is letting them go is if they pay him back 1,000 times. Tanya screams that it is impossible, and Noel says he will have to go back to physical punishment again. He adds that if she doesn't want to see Lloyd getting messed up, she could take the beating herself, and being an advocate of gender equality, he will beat her without mercy. Tanya is terrified now, and Noel asks her to tell him if she also gambled along with Lloyd. She stammers but doesn't say anything, so Noel uses another one of his skills on her to force her to say the truth. Tanya becomes brainwashed and admits that they gambled the party funds together, but it is Lloyd's fault that they lost it because she would definitely have won it all if she played a few more rounds. As soon as Noel breaks his spell, Tanya freaks out, reminding him that using mind control spells for personal use can send him to jail. Noel knows the laws better than her and says that it is justified when getting out a criminal confession, so the only people going to prison for 10 long years are them. Seeing this chance, Shady approaches Noel and asks him to hand over his 1 million reward. Noel tells him to wait a bit because he is not done yet, but Shady grabs his arm, asking if he plans to scam him. Noel flings him aside and tells him not to touch him with his dirty hands. Shady gets angry at this and draws his dagger, but without even giving him a chance, Noel knocks him out with a punch to his gut, which was a self-defense technique his grandpa taught him. Just then, a fancy carriage arrives there, and Noel was just waiting for that too. The carriage stops and the gayest gay man steps out of it, asking Noel why did he call him to such a poor and dusty countryside. Everyone freaks out on seeing the flamboyant man named Fino, who belongs to one of most powerful mafia families in the capital, and is the biggest slave trader in the country. Walter asks Noel what this means, and he replies that since Lloyd and Tanya don't have any money, He is going to sell them off as slaves to cover for what they stole. Tanya begs him not to do that, but Noel tells her that her only other option is going to jail with mandatory hard labor, and the survival rate for such prisoners is just 2%. He tells her that being bought by a nice master will be better for them anyway, and then tells Fino to find good owners for them soon. Fino runs to evaluate the goods and tells Noel that they will get him about 6 million. Noel says it is too low, and Fino says it is all he can manage right now. He lets him on a family secret, saying that the church has ordered their family to reduce their spending, and even as powerful as they are, their family can't go against them, so buying an expensive slave is off limits. Noel says he understands and decreases his ask from 12 million to 11 million. Fino freaks out on hearing this and says that he can't pay that much, but Noel keeps increasing the amount by 1 million each time he protests. Fino gets mad at him, but then Noel reveals his plan. He says that if Fino buys them for 15 million, he will spread the word that he bought them for 30 million. That way, a fake hype will be created for Lloyd and Tanya, who caught the eye of the most flamboyant man in the capital. Noel believes that Lloyd and Tanya are young and good-looking, and with Fino's business skills, he might be able to sell them for a lot more than 30 million. Fino is blown away by this plan, and despite the risk that they may be found out, he agrees to the deal. He then turns to Shady and tells him that if he speaks anything he heard today, his entire family will have dinner for his pigs. With that, Fino hands Noel his down payment, and his men carry away Lloyd, and Tanya begins begging Noel for mercy, saying they used to be friends. Noel says that he doesn't consider people who gamble with his money as his friends, and tells her to enjoy her new life as a slave. Tanya is devastated and turns to Walter, but he also shakes his head. She snaps at this and tells Walter to help her because she knows he has got the hots for her. She tells him that if he can't help her now, he will die a virgin. The guards take her away while she is still screaming and kicking, and Noel gives Shady his promised reward. Shady throws some shade at him, saying that he is just a yapper after all, but Noel tells him to be more creative with his insults. He begins walking away and Shady calls him a demon. Noel likes that, and he decides to build a reputation of being a demon going ahead. However, his party is disbanded after returning to the city, as Walter decides to quit being an adventurer. As they go drinking at the end of the day, Walter tells Noel that he is not mentally strong like him, and he can't do this anymore. He turns down Noel's offer of reforming their party, and says he will just live his life quietly somewhere. The next day, Noel goes to see him off at the gate, and gives him a bottle of expensive wine as their parting gift. He leaves with that, and thinks that it is time to start from the beginning again. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing and watch the video on your screen next.